Hello, my name is Audrey. My life has never been a simple one, but no one could ever imagine that I would stand here today, telling the story of how I went from a perfect life to one completely shattered and full of hardship. Before everything fell apart, I had a family, a stable job, and a husband I trusted completely. I thought I was the luckiest person alive. But everything changed one day, a day I'll never forget. Mark, my husband, the one I thought would be by my side forever, was the first to betray me. Not only did he cheat on me, but he also teamed up with my colleague Mia to sabotage my career and life. When everything started to crumble, I lost not just my husband but my job and the home I had worked so hard to build. But my story doesn't end there. I'm not the kind of person who's easily knocked down. And I won't let them win. Today I'm here to tell you my story. A story of betrayal, revenge, and how I found myself again. I can never forget the days before everything fell apart. Back then, Mark and I lived in a beautiful house on the outskirts of the city. It was a charming place with a small garden that I took pride in taking care of, and we had a simple yet peaceful life. Everything was just right, and I never imagined that one day it would all come crashing down. I worked for a large communications company, where I was in charge of managing key projects. I loved my job because it gave me a sense of fulfillment, and I felt I was contributing something valuable to the world. Every day I went to work with enthusiasm, determined to do my best and continuously improve myself. I had great colleagues and everything seemed perfect. Mark, my husband, was always my pillar of support. He was the man I trusted above all else, and we had been married for 5 years. We didn't have children yet, as both of us were focused on our careers, but we always planned to have children when everything settled down. Our family life was calm, and I thought we had everything any couple could ask for. Mark's job was also stable. He worked in real estate, and although he was often busy with meetings and deals, when he had free time he always made sure to spend it with me. We often went out for dinner, took walks around the city, and shared the ups and downs of life. He was the man I loved deeply, and I never once doubted him. I never imagined that one day our perfect life would crumble. At work, everything was going smoothly. I had a steady routine and I felt confident in my abilities. My projects were successful and I was even promoted to manage several key accounts. Mia, a younger colleague at the company, started working with me on several projects. Mia was energetic, intelligent, and quick to adapt, and it wasn't long before she became a trusted team member. She was the type of person everyone liked, charming, confident, and quick to make friends. Mark and Mia began collaborating on some of the company's projects, and I didn't think much of it at first. I thought, it's just work, nothing to worry about. But slowly I started noticing things changing. Mark, who had always been so attentive, began to pull away. He was working late more often, and when he came home it felt like he wasn't really there with me. He seemed distant, distracted, and I couldn't help but feel like something was wrong. But I brushed it off, telling myself that he was just stressed with work. There was a nagging feeling inside me that something wasn't right, but I couldn't pinpoint it. Mia had become a bigger part of our work life, and I noticed she and Mark started spending more time together. It wasn't overt, nothing I could directly accuse them of, but it felt strange. I ignored the feeling for as long as I could, convinced that I was just overthinking things, but deep down I knew something had shifted. It started with something small. A phone call I wasn't supposed to overhear, a momentary glance at a text message, a fleeting feeling that something was wrong. But I didn't want to believe it. Mark was my husband, the man I trusted with everything. How could I even entertain the thought that he might be betraying me? But then one evening everything changed. It was a Friday and I had just come home from work early. Mark had mentioned he would be late, a few late meetings with clients, but when I opened the door to our home I found the house empty. His coat was still hanging by the door, his shoes neatly placed where he always left them, but there was something off about the silence that greeted me. It was a quietness I hadn't heard before. I went into the kitchen to put my things down and decided to check my phone. As I scrolled through my messages, I saw a text from Mark's phone. He had left his phone charging on the counter that morning, and for some reason I felt compelled to glance at it. I wasn't proud of what I did next, but in that moment, I couldn't ignore the voice in my head telling me that something was wrong. The message was from Mia. Can't wait to see you tonight. I'll be at the usual spot. Love you. The words felt like a punch to the stomach. Love you. From Mia. I stood there frozen for a long moment, the words on the screen repeating in my mind. Mark had never referred to Mia that way. She was just a colleague, a younger woman at work, someone I trusted. How could this happen? I tried to rationalize it at first. Maybe it was a joke, maybe it was some innocent remark. But deep down I knew it wasn't. I had to know the truth. I waited for Mark to come home, my hands trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. When he walked through the door, his usual smile faded the moment he saw my face. I didn't need to say anything. My expression must have told him everything. Is there something you need to explain to me? I asked, my voice surprisingly calm despite the storm raging inside me. Mark hesitated, his eyes darting around, unable to meet mine. He knew I had seen something. He knew the truth was out. I can explain, he stammered, but his words were empty. There was no justification for what he had done, no excuse that could erase the betrayal. I didn't wait for him to continue. I already knew. I could see it in his face, the guilt, the shame. But what hurt the most was that I had never seen it coming. He and Mia had been hiding their affair for months, even as he stood by me every night pretending nothing was wrong. Even as we talked about our future, about having children, about the life we had built together, he was lying to my face. But that wasn't the end of it. As if this wasn't enough, my mind raced back to the moments I had spent with Mia at work. The trust one had placed in her, the hours we'd worked side by side. The realization hit me hard. Mia was not just a colleague. She was an active participant in the betrayal. She had known everything. She had been helping Mark tear apart everything I had worked for. I couldn't believe it. I needed answers, and I needed them now. Why Mia? I asked, my voice now trembling with emotion. Why her? Mark lowered his head. I never meant for it to happen like this. It just happened. We were both in a bad place and I couldn't control it. I echoed. You've destroyed everything we had for this? But the worst part? Mark wasn't the only one who had done something unforgivable. Mia had done far worse. She had actively undermined me at work, stolen clients, manipulated situations to her advantage, and worst of all, she had used our shared time and trust to destroy everything I had built. I had worked for years to get to where I was, and now Mia had come along, pulled the rug out from under me and taken everything away. When I returned to the office the next week, the environment had changed. Mia had used her position to push me out, and her scheming was not only a betrayal on a personal level but a professional one as well. The colleagues I had once considered friends were now turning their backs, aligning with Mia as she took over the very projects I had worked on for years. My credibility was in question, and I had been pushed out without warning or justification. I realized then that it wasn't just my marriage I had lost. It was my career, my identity, and my future. Everything I had worked so hard to build was being stolen from me. But this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. The anger that had begun as a dull ache was now burning in my chest. I wasn't going to let Mia and Mark destroy me. I would get revenge. Not through the courts or legal systems, but through the only weapon I had left. My mind. The days that followed the confrontation with Mark were a blur. The pain was unbearable, but nothing compared to the overwhelming sense of loss. What started as a small crack in my life, an affair, a betrayal, had exploded into a catastrophe, taking everything I had worked for and turning it into rubble. When I lost my job, it felt like the ground beneath me had vanished. I had dedicated years to my work. I was good at it, passionate even. I had built relationships, cultivated clients, and forged a reputation in the company. But Mia, with her charm and manipulation, had turned everything upside down. I hadn't seen it coming. She had planted seeds of doubt about my capabilities, sabotaged my projects, and eroded my standing in the company. They didn't even give me a chance to defend myself. They just cut me loose as if I were disposable. I was no longer a part of the team. The email I received was blunt, sterile, almost as if I were a machine, rather than a person who had put everything into her work. We regret to inform you that your services are no longer required. Effective immediately. Just like that, everything I had built over the years evaporated into thin air. I didn't know where to go. Mark had already made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with me anymore. He'd told me I was a burden, a constant reminder of his mistakes, and that I needed to leave. I couldn't even protest. I had no job, no money, and no place to stay. My family was miles away and I hadn't spoken to them in years. There was no one left to turn to. I packed a few belongings, things that could fit into a small bag, and left the house. Mark didn't even look at me as I walked out the door. His coldness was a knife to my heart. I was no longer the woman he married. I was just an inconvenience to him, something he wanted to get rid of. I spent the next few days aimlessly wandering the city, unsure of where to go. My phone was disconnected and I had no way of contacting anyone. The first night I spent sleeping in my car, parked in a dark corner of a shopping plaza. It was uncomfortable and lonely. The only warmth I had came from the thin blanket I had managed to grab from home. I tried to sleep, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. Mark, Mia, my job, my life, all of it swirling around in my head. By day, I wandered the streets trying to figure out where I could go for help. I didn't have enough money to rent a room and I didn't even know how to start over. I had to rely on soup kitchens and homeless shelters, but the stigma was unbearable. People looked at me with pity as if I were invisible. I was a person who had once had it all, and now I was nothing more than a shadow on the sidewalk. The hardest part wasn't the lack of a roof over my head though. It wasn't the hunger or the exhaustion. The hardest part was the feeling of complete isolation. My phone was dead and I had no way to reach out to anyone. I had no one left to turn to. I had lost everything and the loneliness felt suffocating. I met a few other people who were also living on the streets, some who had been there longer than I had, some who had been abandoned by their families or had fallen into addiction. The stories were heart-wrenching. We all had something in common. Life had knocked us down and we had no choice but to survive. But none of us had the answers to how we could rebuild. One evening while I was walking near a shelter, I met an older woman named Clara. She was in her 60s, wearing a thick coat despite the warm weather, her hair matted and unkempt. She smiled at me when I passed by and for some reason I stopped to talk to her. "Are you okay?" Clara asked, her voice raspy but kind. "You look lost." I hesitated at first, but something in her tone made me open up. I told her everything, about Mark, Mia, losing my job, my house, and how I had ended up on the streets. Clara listened without interrupting, her eyes soft with understanding. "I know it feels like the end of the world right now," Clara said, "but let me tell you something, life is a funny thing. It knocks you down, beats you up, but it doesn't keep you down unless you let it. You've got to keep going even when it seems hopeless." Her words didn't immediately comfort me, but they stayed with me. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but Clara's kindness reminded me that there were still some good people in this world, even when it felt like everything was falling apart. The following days were filled with small victories. Finding a place to shower, getting a warm meal from a shelter, and meeting other people who understood what it was like to lose everything. I even found a small corner of the city where I could sit and read, just to escape from the overwhelming reality of being homeless. But my mind kept going back to one thing. I wasn't done yet. This wasn't the end of my story. I would not let Mark, Mia, or the world take everything from me. Somewhere deep inside I knew I had to fight. I didn't know how or when, but I wasn't giving up. I was going to rise from this, one way or another. I couldn't rebuild my life overnight, but I had started to take the first steps. And that was all that mattered. The days after I lost everything were dark, but something in me shifted. I was no longer the woman who cried herself to sleep in the car. I wasn't going to let Mark and Mia win. I didn't need the courts or the justice system to find peace. I was going to take matters into my own hands. I wasn't going to let them destroy me. No, this was far from over. The first step was simple. I needed help. I couldn't do this alone, and that's when I remembered Emily. Emily and I had worked together at the company for years. She was sharp, strategic, and someone I trusted deeply. When I had still been at the company, Emily had always been one of the few people who genuinely supported me. She had seen the way Mia treated me, the way she subtly undermined me. I hadn't spoken to Emily since I left the company, but I knew she was the one person who would understand. I found her number, hesitated for a moment, then dialed. It felt strange reaching out to her after everything, but I needed her on my side. When Emily picked up, I could hear the surprise in her voice. "Audrey? Is everything okay? I've been trying to reach you. I need your help," I said, my voice low. "I'm not okay. And I'm not letting them get away with this." I explained everything. Mark, Mia, the affair, the sabotage of my career, and how I had ended up on the streets. I could hear the anger in Emily's voice as I spoke. She was furious that Mia, whom she had once trusted as a colleague, could do something so cruel. She was ready to help me get back at them. "I'm in," Emily said. "We'll get them back. But we're not doing it the legal way. That'll take years. We're doing this our way." And just like that, I had a partner in my revenge. Emily's mind worked quickly, and she started forming a plan almost immediately. She knew exactly what needed to be done. The first part of our plan was to expose Mia's lies. Emily had been working with computers and data management for years, and she knew how to dig into people's private records without them knowing. Mia, with her role in the company, had access to sensitive information that she had been using to manipulate things to her advantage. Things that could cost her dearly if revealed. Emily helped me hack into the company's internal systems, using her knowledge of security loopholes to gain access to files that Mia had tried to cover up. We uncovered emails, messages, and documents that showed Mia had been embezzling company funds, forging client reports, and manipulating accounts to benefit her own interests. She had not only betrayed me on a personal level but had also been engaged in serious misconduct in the workplace. With this evidence in hand, we now had a weapon. Mia's own deceitful actions that would destroy her reputation and career. But we weren't done yet. Next, we turned our attention to Mark. I was done being the woman who blindly trusted him. He had betrayed me in the worst way, and now it was time for him to feel the weight of his actions. Emily and I knew Mark well. He was a businessman, and like all businessmen, he cared deeply about his reputation. What he didn't know was that I had been paying attention. Over the years, I had gathered information about his deals, his clients, his relationships with people in the real estate world. I knew exactly how he operated, and now it was time to use that information. We began to plant the seeds of doubt in his business relationships. I reached out to a few of Mark's clients, subtly reminding them of some of his questionable practices and the way he had manipulated situations to his advantage. The clients I contacted were ones that Mark had always taken for granted. His loyal clients who trusted him unconditionally. But with just a few well-timed suggestions and the whisper of a lie or two, they began to question Mark's integrity. Emily also helped me gather information on some of Mark's shady business deals, real estate investments he had manipulated for personal gain. We sent anonymous emails to his investors, hinting at potential fraud and deceptive practices. The result was immediate. Mark started losing clients. His business began to slow down. The once stable empire he had built began to show cracks. And then the final blow came. With Mia's financial misconduct and Mark's shady deals out in the open, we decided it was time to pull the curtain back. Emily and I sent an anonymous email to the board of directors of the company, attaching all the evidence we had gathered. The company was shocked. Mia was fired almost immediately, and the news of her fraudulent activities spread like wildfire. But that wasn't enough. I knew that Mark, being the arrogant man he was, would never admit to his wrongdoings unless forced. So I confronted him. I showed him the evidence we had gathered, the business deals he had covered up, and the lies he had told to maintain his position. For the first time I saw real fear in his eyes. Mark had always been the man who held all the cards, but now in front of me he was a man cornered. His reputation in tatters, his clients pulling away, his business on the brink of collapse. "I'll ruin you," he spat, his voice shaky. But I wasn't scared anymore. I had already won. He wasn't the man I had once loved. He was just a coward hiding behind his success. "I already won," I replied. "You just don't know it yet." It didn't take long before Mark and Mia's downfall became public. The company distanced itself from them both and their reputations were ruined. Mia, who had once seemed untouchable, was now out of a job, exposed for the criminal she was. Mark, too, found himself with nothing, his business in shambles and his credibility shattered. But for me, the revenge wasn't the sweet taste of their suffering. It was the peace of knowing that I had taken back control. The weight that had been on my shoulders for so long finally lifted. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the one who had fought back and won. After everything that had happened, losing my job, my home, and my marriage, I had expected some sense of satisfaction once the truth was revealed. But the reality was far more complex. Watching Mark and Mia's lives unravel didn't fill me with joy, nor did it heal the pain I had been carrying for so long. It was the relief of justice, but not the kind of victory I had imagined. The day Mia was fired was a day I will never forget. The company, once her playground, now rejected her entirely. The emails we had sent to the board went viral within the company. As soon as the news broke, everyone in the office seemed to know. Mia, the woman who had been charming and manipulative, was now nothing more than a criminal. The professional world, which had once admired her, now turned its back. The weight of her actions finally caught up to her. I had no sympathy for her. Watching her face as she was escorted out of the building, her head hung low in shame, I felt nothing but the faintest sense of closure. Mia had been the perfect villain, but in the end she had been her own undoing. Her desire for power, her hunger for success at anyone's expense, had led to her downfall. I never had to say a word to her. The truth had spoken for itself. But it was Mark who was the hardest to watch. The man who had once been my world, the one I trusted implicitly, now stood with nothing. I watched his business slowly crumble as client after client dropped him. His reputation, which he had spent years building, was shattered. The investors who had trusted him now saw him for who he truly was: manipulative, dishonest, and corrupt. The phone calls started coming, the cancellations, the complaints. He had never been prepared for this. In one of our final conversations, Mark had pleaded with me. He begged for forgiveness, told me he was sorry for everything, but his words felt empty. I looked at him not with anger but with pity. This man, who had once seemed so strong, was now a broken shell of the person I had married. He was just a coward who had hidden behind lies, using me as his shield to protect himself from the consequences of his actions. I had no sympathy for him. He had betrayed me and no apology could fix that. But despite his pleas, I didn't want to keep him in my life any longer. I didn't need him. I didn't need his lies or his guilt. So I walked away, leaving him to face the consequences of his own doing. The relief that came with revenge didn't last long. For all the pain I had inflicted on Mark and Mia, I realized something important. I was still hurting. The wound they had left on me, the betrayal and the loss of everything, those things didn't just disappear with their punishment. I needed to heal. I decided to focus on rebuilding my life, piece by piece. It was a slow process, but I started with the basics. I found a small apartment, one that was affordable but gave me the space I needed to breathe and think. It was a new beginning and I knew I couldn't stay stuck in the past. I couldn't let their actions define my future. I started working again, slowly getting back into the professional world. It wasn't easy at first. I had to rebuild my reputation starting from scratch. But with Emily's help, I slowly found my footing. Emily was still by my side, offering advice and support when I needed it most. We would talk late at night about our dreams and the kind of work we wanted to do. Together, we were going to make something new. One of the biggest lessons I learned in the aftermath of all this was how important it was to take control of my own future. I realized I didn't want to work for someone else anymore. I didn't want to be in a position where someone could come in and take everything from me again. I wanted to build something for myself. So, I decided to take a leap of faith and start my own company, a small consulting firm that specialized in branding and communications. It wasn't easy and there were days when I felt overwhelmed, but every step I took felt like a step toward freedom. With the experience I had gained from my previous job and the lessons learned from my downfall, I knew I had the tools to succeed. I started small, working with local clients who appreciated my expertise. But soon word of mouth spread and my business began to grow. Emily helped me build the foundation of the company. She wasn't just a friend, she became a partner. Together we created a team and slowly the company began to thrive. It wasn't just about making money. It was about creating something that mattered, something that was built on trust, transparency, and honesty. Looking back, I can't say that everything was easy. There were moments when I thought I wouldn't make it. There were nights when I felt the weight of my past bearing down on me, and I questioned whether I could truly rebuild. But with every challenge I grew stronger. I realized that revenge, in the end, was never about making Mark and Mia suffer. It was about reclaiming my life, my power, and my dignity. It was about finding peace within myself, knowing that I had the strength to rise above the betrayal and rebuild from the ashes. The company continued to grow, and with each new project I found a little more of myself. My past no longer haunted me. I had learned that the only person who could truly control my fate was me. And now, looking around at what I had built, my business, my independence, my peace, I knew that I had won. Not because I had destroyed Mark and Mia, but because I had taken my life back. Rebuilding from the ashes wasn't an easy feat, but it was the only path forward. The first few months after I had started the consulting business were a blur. I had to push through so many hurdles, financial struggles, self-doubt, and the constant pressure of keeping things afloat. But through it all, one thing kept me going: the burning desire to reclaim control over my life. I woke up every morning determined to make it work. There were moments when I questioned myself, when I doubted my ability to succeed and feared the mistakes of the past would follow me. But those fears didn't last long. I realized that if I kept looking backward, I would never move forward. I had to let go of the past completely and focus on the future I was building. The breakthrough came when I secured my first client. A small but promising startup that needed help with their brand identity. It wasn't much, but it was the first step. I worked day and night, crafting their message, creating a visual identity, and helping them launch their first major marketing campaign. The satisfaction of seeing them succeed was overwhelming. I realized that my skills were valuable, that I could still make an impact in this world, even after everything that had happened. That project brought me more than just revenue. It gave me the validation I needed. It reminded me that I still had the ability to create, to influence, and to thrive. I poured everything into that project. Every ounce of creativity, every lesson learned from my past. I wanted to prove to myself that I could build something that mattered, something that was based on honesty and integrity, unlike the toxic environment I had left behind. With my first success under my belt, things started to fall into place. Slowly but surely, more clients came knocking. I took on projects from local businesses and small nonprofits, helping them craft their brands and communicate effectively with their audiences. It felt good to help others, to know that I was making a difference. But the real joy came from seeing my own company take shape. I hired a small team of passionate, like-minded individuals. Each of them brought something special to the table, and together we began building something truly remarkable. Emily, of course, was there every step of the way, helping with the logistics and operations of the business. She was my right-hand woman, and her belief in me kept me going when I felt exhausted. We worked tirelessly to grow our reputation. The company became known for its transparency, its values, and its dedication to clients. We didn't just help businesses create marketing strategies, we helped them tell their stories, their truth. Every project I took on was a chance to show the world that I had learned from my past, and that I was stronger than ever. But success didn't come without challenges. I faced competition from larger agencies, who had more resources and established reputations. There were times when I thought I couldn't keep up, but I reminded myself why I had started this business in the first place. It wasn't about beating the competition. It was about creating something that was truly mine, something that I could be proud of. I knew the struggles of starting over, and I knew the loneliness of being at the bottom. But I also knew the strength it took to rise from the ashes. Every obstacle was just another lesson. Every setback was an opportunity to refine my approach, to improve my business, and to grow as a leader. One of the most significant challenges I faced came when a major client who had been a pillar of my business decided to pull out of their contract. It was a huge blow, and for a brief moment I doubted everything. But I quickly realized that this was just another test. I couldn't afford to let this setback define me. Instead of giving up, I doubled down, focusing on finding new clients and expanding my services. I reached out to more nonprofit organizations, offering them branding and communications services at discounted rates to help them get the exposure they needed. Things started to pick up again. We gained a steady stream of clients, and word of mouth spread about our company's work. We became a trusted name in the industry for small businesses and nonprofit organizations. The more success we achieved, the more I realized that this company wasn't just a business. It was a reflection of who I had become. There was a moment late one night when I sat back in my office, looking at all the work we had done, and I felt a wave of pride wash over me. This wasn't just about making money or beating Mark and Mia at their own game. This was about me reclaiming my identity, my voice, and my future. I had taken control of my destiny, and no one could take that away from me. The final piece of the puzzle came when I received an email from an old client who had worked with me before I lost everything. He had heard about my company and the work we were doing. In his message he said, "I always knew you were destined for great things, Audrey. I'm glad to see you're doing well." That message, simple as it was, meant more to me than any award or financial success. It was a reminder that I wasn't alone in this journey. People believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. And now I had built something that wasn't just about profit. It was about making a difference. I had found peace not in revenge but in creation. I had rebuilt my life from the ground up, and this time I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. I was proud of who I had become and proud of the business I had created. Most importantly, I was at peace with my past. The pain had faded, and what remained was a story of resilience and strength.